Hello and welcome to Our Voices. I'm Amina Aliyu, joined by my colleagues Salam Solomon, Oriana Tangishaka, and Semna Shekoye are off today. Today we'll be talking about the rising cost of higher education and how that impacts women across Africa. Salam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Salam, what can you share with me about your own, let's say, college experience?
I'm going to age myself here, but when I did my undergraduate, I did my undergraduate in Eritrea, which is where I'm originally from. Education is free in Eritrea, and so I had to go to school for free, basically. But the system is more intertwined with the government, and so how you pay for your how you pay back is through national service. So you get paid meager salary, and you have no choice in how you choose where to work. The government decides everything for you. So that's different. Yes.
You know, I was thinking about my time in college, and it wasn't that long ago, people. It wasn't that long ago. And I was doing the math right before we came into the studio, and I was thinking, because the naira has been so devalued against the dollar, it's insane. Right now in the black market, the dollar is about 930. The naira is about 930 to $1. And I did the math, and I was like, the first time I was going to university, I went to university in the UK. It cost my parents about 5-point-something million naira to send me off to school. That was my full tuition, accommodation, and my allowance for that entire year.
It's very high. The cost is very high.
5 million naira can barely buy you 5,000 pounds.
Right. I mean, fast forward even from my personal experience.
This is 10 years ago. I'm like,
yeah.
This is insane.
Even when I went to school, the university was fully functional. I don't know what's going on right now. It was internationally accredited, and so even the quality of education was different. Fast forward,
looking at that picture was from 2015.
Yeah, right,
Not even that long. That's when I graduated college.
Right. And fast forward to the U.S. When I came to the U.S., it's expensive, and when I did my master's degree, I had to work 2 jobs. I had a part-time job at a newspaper, and I was a teaching assistant in the university department that I was working on. Yes. So I had to juggle a lot to make sure that I come out without student debt. So the cost is expensive.
It's crazy, especially when you're trying to get an education abroad for students that are on the continent, just because of, the trifecta of Ukraine, COVID, global warming, everything. It's making things skyrocket to a point where I don't even know what to say right now. But, let's get into the show. So we joined many of our youth across the continent in celebrating the completion of their secondary school education over the summer. But as they set their sights on their next academic adventure, there looms the ever-rising cost of pursuing higher education, both at home and abroad. According to the World Bank blogs published in March of 2023, Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest rates of education exclusion of the 6 developing world regions and its cities. It cites tuition as one of the main barriers for low-income families in securing quality education. As a direct cause of the COVID pandemic, a country like Uganda recorded approximately 15 million children had fallen behind on their education. Uganda's National Planning Authority mentioned in a Think Global Health article that nearly 1/3 of these students may never return to school. What does this mean for the pursuit of higher education on the continent? On this week's episode of Our Voices, we will shed light on the pressing issue of the rising cost of higher education and the associated costs. We will hear expert opinion and explore innovative solutions to accessing quality education. Welcome to the conversation.
And we're going to go to Nigeria now. Tertiary institutions across Nigeria have concluded the 2022-2023 academic session, while the new session will resume this month in August. What lies ahead for the students is a tuition fee hike that may prevent many from going back to school. Gibson Emeka has the story from Abuja, Nigeria.
22-year-old Benita Oloniyo is a fourth-year law student at the University of Abuja in Nigeria capital. Paying her old tuition fee of $82 was a struggle. She even worked as an intern to support her expenses. Oluniyo's school fee just got raised to $146. That is threatening her education as she cannot afford the new amount. Oluniyo says she may even take on petty trade to augment her income.
To pay the school fees is an issue, but I had to delve into entrepreneurship because of the increment of school fees to try and see if I could meet up before the next section comes.
The government have been financing public university in Nigeria that kept the learning cost low for students, but all that changed when the new administration said it could no longer afford tertiary education. That means self-funding students from low-income families may drop out of school. Deborah Idowu, a student in one of the Nigerian universities, says she cannot cope.
I am a self-funding student. I am sponsoring myself through school, and if the increments rub off on me, I don't think I'll be able to further. It wouldn't be easy for me to further.
Parents with low income are also struggling to afford college fees that have surged by over 100% in most schools. Samuel Ayongo, a middle-level civil servant and a father of 3 university students, say he may need to make difficult choice.
It is really a difficult situation. So we are discussing already on what step we will take. That is myself and the children. But personally, if this thing remains the way it is, I have no choice than to drop them. Then we'll see what we can do with the few or one that will remain. Then others maybe we'll take to skills. I think that would be the only option to go with.
The move to increase school fees was triggered by the rising cost of operation, a fallout from the recent fuel subsidy removal. Abubakar Umar, a professor and the dean of student affairs at the University of Abuja, urged the government to reconsider its decision on tertiary education funding.
The government can fund tertiary education if government will fix wastages, if government will prioritize, and if government is sincere. Education is one of the basic needs, and no country in the world surrenders education to the dogs or to the whims and caprices of the so-called market forces. We are not saying that government alone should fund it, but government should subsidize it.
Nigeria tertiary education has suffered instant strike action due to long dispute between the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, and the government over low wages and welfare benefits. With the current high inflation rate, education sector watcher says hiking tuition might cut many from acquiring higher education. Gibson Emeka for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
The Nigerian government insists that the federal government-owned universities remain tuition-free, describing it as inaccurate reports of introduction of tuition by the institutions. However, according to an article in the Times newspaper of Nigeria, quoting the special advisor to the president on special duties, communication and strategy, Dele Aleke, tuition hikes are completely at the discretion of the university management.
Joining us here in the studio to discuss the rising cost of higher education on the continent and abroad is Ekua Bentil. She's a senior education specialist in the Education Global Practice of the World Bank, with a focus on higher education, digital skills, use of technology in education, and STEM agendas in Sub-Saharan Africa, or SSA. The initiative also seeks to improve the participation of women in these areas. She is part of a core team developing the World Bank's education strategy for West and Central Africa. Akua, welcome to Our Voices.
Thank you.
We're so happy that you were able to make time to come today, even though everything was so short notice.
No, thank you very much for having me.
So, Akua, my first question for you, which I imagine you can see it on my face already. Your focus is on on West Africa and Central Africa, a significant chunk of which is in Sub-Saharan Africa. And when we talk about the issues, where does one begin? There's gender, there's instability, disability, and so many other things. Why is it so important for girls to not be left behind and be carried along in your own experience with regards to the development of that region and education?
Thank you very much for that question, Amina. So, as you rightly indicated, currently I work very closely in the Western and Central Africa region, and my focus on higher education. And recently we did develop a strategy for the education sector in the region. And one of the things that was clear is the importance of ensuring that at least girls are going through or transitioning through upper secondary school and also making it through higher education. Why is this important? Because if you educate the girl child, you are ensuring that her children will be healthier, and also they'll be more educated. And also she can contribute to a lot of the development that is going on in our world today. And so it's very, very important. And one interesting example that I have in the Africa Centers of Excellence project that I lead, which is a higher education project across Africa. We currently have over 80 centers in the region, and in the Western Central Africa region, the one I lead, we have about 53 centers. And these centers are working across over 10 different sectors, from health to food security to ICT, and making sure that we have the next generation of master students, PhD students, and improving research in Africa. And we are ensuring that women are a core part of this particular project. And just a small example of, ensuring that women have a strong hand in this process is we have one center in northern Nigeria at Bayero University in Kano. And this center is a center in public health and policy. And they really recently just came up with a finding. They did research in ensuring that postpartum hemorrhage is dealt with. And this is something that every 7 minutes from their statistics, a woman dies in the world, right?
When you talk about, and you've been involved in a lot of projects across the continent. The World Bank is involved in making sure that education is accessible to young girls. But I don't know if it's by design or by societal, norms. Young women and girls are underrepresented when it comes to, say, for instance, STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and math. In your work, what is the World Bank doing, or what are you doing to fill that gap?
So that's a very, very good question. One of the things we're doing, particularly in the project that I'm leading, the Africa Centers of Excellence project, is to ensure that more and more women are encouraged in. So we incentivize the centers. This is a results-based project. So, for example, what we do is the centers earn more money if they bring in more women, right? So the value that we are attaching to the cost of bringing in a woman is more than bringing in a male.
I think I've come across one of your projects in Kebbi State where they're incentivizing farmers to send their daughters to school, and then they get some type of token to add to their herd. For each child that goes to school, they have an incentive, and then for them, their daughters going to school equals having better cattle.
Yes, so the World Bank does a lot of that, where we incentivize the regular folks to ensure that they're sending their daughters or just their children to school, whether boys or girls, to school, by providing them some subsidies to really incentivize them to do that. But what I was talking about is on the higher education side, but it's the same concept.
Yes.
Ensuring that, how can we give them more funding to pull in more of these female students.
Ms. Kua, thank you. And we're going to, that's a very interesting point. We would like to explore more about that. Now it's time for a quick break. We want to ask our audience to share their tips and resources available to them that eases the pursuit of higher education both on the continent and abroad. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at VOA Africa. And don't forget to use the hashtag VOA Voices. We're also on WhatsApp. Our number is US country code +1 202 503 9025. After the break, we'll talk about the importance of investing in world-class higher education for African students with Dr. Lydia Nkume Bosire and how her organization 8B Education Investment Fund provides affordable financing and technical support to schools in East Africa to bridge the education gap. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
You're with Our Voices. Welcome back. Still with us in the studios is World Bank Senior Education Specialist Ekuwa Nuwan-Bentil. And now joining us via Skype from New York is Dr. Lydia Kamunto-Bosire. She is the founder and CEO of 8B Education Investments, social enterprise organization that provides affordable financing and technical support to higher education institutions in East Africa to help bridge the education gap and create a more equitable society. Dr. Lydia, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're very excited to start this conversation and have you on Our Voices. Thank you. And I've looked into your organization, and from what I've noticed is that you're trying to fill this gap that's been created in Africa in terms of, lending practices that don't exist for higher education. But in Africa, most of the brightest the best and brightest that leave the continent and get education in the US and elsewhere, the problem I've noticed is that once people leave the continent, we have a problem of people coming back. How does your organization work to make sure that there's not a lot of what is commonly known as brain drain?
Thank you. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you so much for having me. What 8B does is to finance the higher education of African students who are going for education outside the continent. The reason why that is an important lane for us to occupy is that currently you either study abroad because you have wealthy parents that can pay $50,000 a year over 4 years or 2 years, depending on your degree, or you're very lucky, as I was, to get a full scholarship to attend one of these very high quality global universities that put you in a lane to global decision making. And if we want Africa to be seen as an equal in global decision making, alongside everything else we're doing for primary access, secondary access, tertiary access on the continent, we also need to be solving this lane of African access to global universities, which are then feeders into the spaces where the future is being built. So then back to your question, which is what happens when the students come abroad? Our focus is enabling students to realize their highest potential. And that might be going on in some years to run Google or X, the company formerly known as Twitter. That calling does not require them to be on the continent. We think that Africa belongs in the world. African brilliance belongs in the world. Solving African problems is solving global problems. And the other
Right.
Right. So before we continue our conversation, our reporter Kwame Amenoto took to the streets of Accra and spoke to three ladies, Christiana Afua, Selma Ibrahim Bamba, and Nana Yasa, to get their thoughts on the surge of tuition fees and higher education on the continent. Let's take a listen.
For me, I think the costs in education in our part of the world is rising. For example, someone like me, I want to pursue a master's program, but looking at the terrain, it's been expensive for me and I've not been able to raise the money to pursue. For example, the university that I want to pursue master's, the master's program is over 10,000 Ghana cedis, and I don't have that kind of money right now. So I see it as a hindrance for me. So for me right now, I'm also looking out for educational opportunities, scholarship opportunities to further abroad. And if I get that, I will grab it. Or some of these online degrees, I will want to pursue them because education has become very expensive.
Personally, my take on education and about the surge in education, how people are traveling to the diaspora in a sub-Saharan country to seek or finalize their education, is that looking at the system in Ghana, we learn a lot of things in some small frame of time. But then when you take a place like, let's say, Canada, US, you focus on only your major. So personally, I have dreams of furthering my education abroad. But what is stopping me at the moment is the cost involved. When you look at even those who are ready to give you scholarships, some wants you to work and also help yourself in school. Sometimes they give half scholarship, which are not even enough. So me, my take will be about the stuff we learn in a semester is too much. You will learn about 5 or 7 courses and you write it at the end of the semester for like 3 months. When you go to the diaspora or the sub-Saharan countries, you focus on only a major.
Giving an example like astronomy, you could see that in Ghana, astronomy is not really much studied and furthered unless people travel abroad. So for this reason, people go outside Ghana or Africa to further their education.
You know, Dr. Lydia, Salem was saying, how do people come back? And I'm thinking, how do I japa? As the young people would say these days. But my question for you is more, I'll paint a scenario. I'm a B student, for example, I'm above average. I go to an average secondary school in Nigeria, but I'm such an Anglophile. I always dreamed of going to school in England. How can you help me?
So here's the thing. If you are a student that is ambitious enough to figure out how to apply, translate your credentials, and get an offer from a university abroad, somebody should be able to bank on that ambition, because we know that students that study abroad, if they come home, a lot of the time they will be earning on top of their income bracket, but many times they now become part of global labor mobility. They will take a job in Singapore or New York, and we should be happy to have young, ambitious Africans everywhere they can realize their potential. So back to your question about being the Anglophile mid-range student.
Yes.
Currently, 8B will not be able to support you because we are only focusing on the US for the current year. But if you were an Anglophile interested in the US, you would come to the 8B platform. You would fill an application that takes less than 10 minutes, which would help us assess whether you're going to the right university, the right program, and whether we can support you. And on the back of that, you would be able to give additional documents and get a loan funded to your university, assuming that you actually need a loan, because we're in the business of providing affordable loans to ambitious African students going to select programs in the US for this year, globally for the coming years.
Right. So, you know, as it exists right now in Africa, most of what we have is household income to fund higher education for young boys and young girls, and also, you know, government or scholarship grants that are available. And so what I want maybe to get your perspective on is, are women and young girls mostly disproportionately underfunded, even in the household level, because they choose to fund the young boys, maybe prioritize them from your line of work?
Yeah, I think still on the continent, we do have households that would still prioritize boys over girls. And if you look on, for example, in West and Central Africa, only about 44% of girls who need to be in secondary school are there, compared to about 55% of boys. So there is still some disproportionate.
So in summary, in two sentences, how do we access the resources? How could these girls access the resources that will give them the opportunity, so that the parents don't have to choose which a girl child or a boy child?
So I think at the secondary school level, governments, there are several governments that have free secondary education, which is expensive, and they are struggling to deal with that. And so one of the things that they need to ensure that those that can pay should pay, and then you target to those that cannot afford to
and
pay.
Then
to
those
ensure
are the ones who should lean towards finding grants and all of those things.
Exactly.
That's super. And that's our show for this week. A very special thank you to our in-studio guest here, Ekua Bentil, and of course Lydia Kemunto Bosire of the HB Education Investment Fund. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have both of you here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
On behalf and on the VOA website, we're on the VOA website at voaafrica.com, where you can catch up on all the latest episodes. On behalf of everyone here on The Voice of America and my co-host, I'm Amina Eliu. Thank you for watching.